Hello and welcome to another episode of Top Deck, the series where we take a look at some of the leading TCG decklets. So here we return with Nicholas Burgess, who took top 4 at a recent LLDS, playing Extra Deck Draco. So once again, Draco making its way onto the series, obviously tailored for the current format with all of the new text involved as well. We're just going to run through the list and the rounds themselves from Nick, and we're going to discuss a few of the cards a little bit as well. So we have 1 Dynamite, double Ghost Ogre, triple Ignis, and double Maiden. Triple Demise, triple Disciples. Typically this gets taken down to 2, but I think he just had the space, so we went with it. Triple Diagram, triple Duality, and only double Terraforming. You do find in a few situations that players are saying that if they have more than one copy of the diagram, then it's kind of problematic because it doesn't really do much without other cards available to carry on cycling through. So you don't really want to top deck it, so we see a few people sort of cutting down this a little bit, so here it's down to 2 Terraforming and 3 Diagram, so not a huge change there. Triple Heritage, only 2 goes in match, and then triple Impermanence, so this we don't tend to see this too much. It has come up a lot. I think it's come up a fair bit in the US as well, and that's mainly just because it works well with Demise, and it's also a good way to have a hand trap within the main deck so that you can respond to decks like Goki. Also in here we have triple Rivalry, 1 Skill Drain, triple APOC, 1 Return, and only double Waterfall. So not desperately fearing something like Pure Strikers, where this comes in to have a little bit extra utility, especially since he has the Impermanence anyway to deal with that kind of thing, and a set Impermanence can deal with problematic spells and traps from your opponent too. For the extra deck, so we have some Cherries targets in here from Buster, Macabre, Baxia you can actually make, the same as Scarlight, then more Cherries from Dante, some more cards you can actually make with Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger and Volcasaurus. Back to Cherries with Toad, Firewall, Electromite, Isolde. I imagine Link Spider is the same, although you can, I think Alex Moffat mentioned that, you know, technically if your opponent gives you a token when you go up against dinos, you can turn that token into a Link Spider. And then 1 Kagari, 1 Shizuku, and 1 double Helix in here. That's it for the extra. For the rest, let's go on to the side then. So triple Amano. We see a lot of UK players have decided not to main Amano or Border, and they're just sort of siding them at the moment because they don't feel like hand traps do an awful lot to them for the current format anyway. Then a triple Ghost Reaper in here, triple Cyclone, a triple Anti-Spell, 2 evenly matched, and the third goes in match here in the side. So let's briefly cover a few things. So the choice for Ghost Ogre is probably the most generic of the monster hand traps that you can go with at the moment, since it hits a lot of things. Ghost Reaper isn't necessarily going to steal you a game. Ghost Ogre won't do it either, but it can. It has sort of utility against a lot of decks, especially Pure Strikers, where you can hit multi-roll or Shizuku in the end phase as well. That's kind of funny. And then you can bring it in against various other decks too, which is quite cool. Then for the rest of the monster lineup, it's pretty basic, to be honest. Sometimes we only see 1 Majesty Maiden, but I mean, it's not a huge difference to have an extra one in here too. Then I mentioned the third Disciples earlier. A lot of people will bring this down to 2 because that's enough to keep on cycling, but if you want extra removal, you may as well play the third copy. Duality, a few people have been dropping this down a bit just in case draw pops up, but I imagine that for this event, he has a fair amount of draw power within the deck, so it doesn't look like he's too concerned about cards suffering from a draw unlock problem. Even so, with Duality is one of the better options, because Terraforming your opponent will hit you with draw immediately after, at which point you can't use your diagram, whereas if you play Duality you can just take something that won't be susceptible to diagram. Heritage you kind of have to play because it's just the advantage card here. And then Gozen at 2 is pretty interesting, so clearly he's not fearing matchups where you need Gozen. One of the most important matchups where this is relevant is of course in the Altergeist matchup. So if he's not really fearing that, then there's no need to play it at 3. It does have utility against other things like Goki and against Sky Striker as well. But he has the extra hand traps from the Impermanence in here too to help out with that as well. I don't think we've seen that many Goki lists in the UK recently, at least playing the Midbreaker field. So without it, Impermanence kind of shuts down the deck entirely, so that's a really good choice for this in there. Warlords obviously is the best floodgate that you can play in this deck since it doesn't clash with any of your monsters. Skill Drain is obviously very solid too. The rest of the True Draco traps are fairly standard, you just typically play these 4. And then he's gone for Double Waterfall, as I mentioned, probably due to not being that afraid of Sky Strikers, where this has the most utility because they attempt to target your monster and you just send it to the graveyard and get off your draws. A little bit of discussion about the side deck then. So Amano, you can choose whether or not you want this for a hand trap heavy deck where you just want to bring it in turn 1, or if you want to lock out your opponent's board by summoning it in turn 2. So nice to see that in the side as an option. Then Cherries, he has gone for the extra deck, and this is the only way to actually really get into it aside from making the Volcasaurus or the Synchro plays. So this allows you to make the Beals, but he hasn't decided to run that because he has these other generic 8s instead. It's more to just take out opposing extra deck monsters so he doesn't have to deal with those. Interestingly, he's gone for Cyclone. I don't think we've seen this in a lot of lists for a while. Draco is certainly one of the decks where you don't tend to have hand advantage, so you can't really run Twin Twisters. And if your opponent does shut you down with something like a Reboot, then at least you have a card that you can play during your opponent's turn. So Cyclone does have some interesting utility there, and if he is fearing Pendulum, then he has a lot of stuff that he could side in to deal with that too. Plus, it has some utility against Sky Strikers, where you know that they'll be setting stuff to interrupt you, and you can banish it, which means they won't be able to get it back with Kagari. As for the anti-spells, these are fairly typical. You only want them when you're going first in most matchups where they are relevant, and they're exceptionally strong against things like Pendulum. Then also Double Evenly as the blowout card against sort of back row decks here. And finally the third goes in just in case it's more relevant than Rivalry, I suppose is the most likely reason to run it. For the Cherries targets, he's optimized the cards that focus on decks he's most likely to come across. So Pure Striker is very, very popular in the UK at the moment. So Kagari and Shizuku, both of these having some use there. Spiral can be problematic, though it's not likely to come up, so you do want to be able to deal with it if it's there. Goki is more likely to come up, but it's still not that common in the UK. I've actually seen more Pendulum players than I've seen Goki players at recent events, so he's got the Pendulum players covered as well, plus Firewall in case this can be used for if you see Cherries late against Goki, or if you see, say you see something like a Trickstar and they want to Firewall loop you, then you can just deal with that by banishing off this Firewall. I don't know if we've seen much of Paleozoic or Frogs recently, but having Toad in here means he has 3 extra side deck cards for it. Dante does come up every now and again, so that's useful to have in there. Invoked has picked up popularity, and as Alfie says in his deck profile, Macabre is the only one that actually does anything, so having Cherries for this deals with that entirely. Plus you do see the occasional rogue player playing Buster, so that covers pretty much everything in here. I don't think there's another deck which we've seen being particularly popular in the UK metagame which it's all that relevant to have Cherries for. So overall a really nice list. Let's get on to the rounds that he played then. So for round 1 he went up against Pendulum and he went 2-0. Round 2 he went up against one of his friends actually, and he decided to just scoop immediately because he wanted his friend to be able to get into the LLDS top cut. In the third round he had a mirror match and went 2-0. Round 4 he went up against Hell Knights of all things and went 2-0. That's actually picked up a lot of popularity in the UK for some reason. I think it's just because they can run a lot of the good floodgates. Round 5 against Pure Invoked he went 2-0, and in the top 4 he went up against his friend again and scooped so that his friend could get the invite. So essentially undefeated then. He hasn't actually lost any of the games, although he did submit to his friend in round 2 and the top 4. So thanks very much Nick for bringing on your list this time around and showing us just what you could do at the recent LLDS, going basically undefeated with extra deck Draco. Congratulations, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. Thanks for watching this episode of Top Deck. If you have any comments or suggestions that you would like to make, leave them in the comment section down below. Check out the description for details of how you can get involved in this series. You can enter by voice interview, or instead you could just send all of your information over Facebook Messenger. Anything like that will be absolutely fine. If you want to see anything in particular from the upcoming series, then be sure to get in touch, and I'll see you guys in the next video.